Guys, it's LS, and this video is going to be probably a little bit negative relative to what some people might like to hear, so I'm just prefacing that some stuff needs to be said because apparently not enough people are saying it. So one of the main problems going on right now inside of NA and EU is the whole relegation problem. You see some very big name teams, some teams with very big names attached to them, most notably Echo Fox, NRG, who has Shaquille O'Neal as a figure of a part of that team. And then in Europe, you have teams like Rocat, Origin, FC, potentially facing relegation in that region. And so one of the things that we need to talk about, and I'm just warning you guys that some of the stuff that I'm going to say, probably not going to like to hear. And if you're a fan of said player or said team, you're not going to want to hear it either. But I'm not going to say anything that has any bias attached to it, and it's going to be nothing but the honest truth. So in NA right now, you have NRG potentially facing relegation, and they have to go up against Echo Fox. Now, NRG is a team that since creation, before it was even actually born, I'm saying before they even purchased the slot, before they even came into LCS, they had management decisions that were being done behind the scenes that obviously no one is aware of, that just completely destroyed the entire team before it even happened. I mean, if we're actually looking at the ability to just single-handedly fuck over chances of a person, a management, from a management standpoint, in terms of reducing the team's successful chances going into the LCS, it would have been what happened before they even entered in. So we're looking at pre-spring split here, okay? Now, NRG enters into spring split. They bring over Gang by Mom, and they have Impact. Now, Gang by Mom isn't actually a good player relative to other mid laners that are available inside of Korea and even inside of other regions. Okay, they had Moon, who got a lot of flack, but honestly, he's not that bad of a player. And then they had Impact in top lane, who later on went to move to Cloud9, and then they had some issues with the coaching staff, and then they had the issues with the management, where History Teacher ended up leaving. And there was all this other stuff going on. And I believe Charlie was even released before the split began, or he was released early into the split. I'm not totally sure on that one, but nonetheless, NRG has been a shit show since the very beginning. And this is primarily because, and it's also very potent in other teams, that NA is House of Cards on crack. So hence the title of this video, League of Cards. You have basically a ton of people that are involved directly into the scene, and if you realize how deep some of the management or staffs of some of these teams go, you'll realize that you're looking at, a dozen or 2 dozen people sometimes per team. When it goes this deep, it really does become who you know and not what you know. And when that starts happening, and when skill is thrown out the window, and when the ability to actually determine what sort of rosters are going to be correct, you start having coaches bring in players that they're more friendly with, or you start having management side with, certain staffs that are going to be less than ideal for said roster, or you have, players that are deserving of, trials or subs or something that would enable them to play on the main roster, or potentially even be used as a substitute for the main roster, not getting the chance simply on the onus that they are not friendly enough with some of the people inside of the organization. And so because of this, what you have begun to see is you see the imports coming in from every region. You see teams that have extremely stacked financial backing, and it doesn't make any sense why, given their financial backing, they are only able to produce a team that is so bad that, not even halfway through the season, everyone already knows that they're going to head into relegation. Echo Fox's team, I feel bad for them. They were formerly Gravity, and before that they were Cursed Academy. And Gravity in Summer Split had, a nice lineup, and then at the end of the Summer Split, all the players actually go elsewhere. And then, Echo Fox acquires the team. They bring in Froggen, they bring in Big, they had Cop on coach, and they bring in other players and stuff, and, there was a lot of hype for the Echo Fox lineup. And then I think midway through the split, Cop ended up getting removed, but that doesn't really change anything at the end of the day. You had KFO up in top lane, and it really begs the question on how are some of these players actually being scouted. And so, again, this is where we're going to get to the part where you're not going to like potentially what I have to say. First off, Gank by Mom, before he went to NA, I think it's very important to note that he was hard stuck in what Koreans would call low MMR. And this would normally be okay if he was fluctuating between certain tiers. And a player that was fluctuating between certain tiers that actually recently got picked up in Europe was Move, the former jungler for Gravity Gaming, a year ago. And he was fluctuating between anywhere from Diamond 2 to 600 LP Challenger. Another player that is very known for high fluctuations is Bengi. Bengi is a player that was in Diamond 3, fluctuating into high Challenger, and I think recently even secured a top 20 Challenger spot on Korea, and now he fell down a little bit. The thing, though, for Gank by Mom is there was actually multiple mid laners that were being tried out for NRG. And it was very peculiar because Gank by Mom, in the duo sessions anyways, actually performed the worst, to my knowledge, back then, of other mid laners that were actually available. But he was brought over anyway because of his name, and because obviously he might bring attention. He had a lot of fans, even in LCK. He had actually a lot of foreign fans because of his trollless nature and whatever. But the truth of the matter is there was probably, even if we're not looking at LCK mid laners, 20 other Korean mids available if you actually have people that are qualified to scout talent or to evaluate, whether or not someone's going to actually be good. But one of the problems is, and you'll notice that Korea is almost the only region that has this going on, is in NA and Europe, you'll see pros getting recycled over and over and over. Why on earth is Kiwi Kid on NRG? Why is OQ being supplemented to playing with someone that he is calibers above in every single aspect? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, you can say that it's because of the import process, but we've already evaluated that Gank by Mom had no business being the mid laner for NRG. He also had no business having the team built around him. That's just a fact. You don't build the team around someone that's not actually good enough to be deserving of having a team built around them in the first place. The other thing, that we can mention is we have the boosting thing, boosting teams into LCS. You have the Cloud9 Challenger, where they have basically an LCS qualified lineup in terms of they have High, one of the best shot callers of all time. They have Lemon Nation. They have Balls. He's not bad by any means. In terms of NA anyway. They have Contracts, who replaced Rush, and they just have an okay lineup, and they also have Altec. So this is a team that can actually play inside of LCS, absolutely obliterating the competition in Challenger Series. And the people that are in Challenger Series, the Challengers, the Masters, that, again, they could potentially maybe actually be used as a viable sub option on LCS teams, they're either playing on teams that just, they don't have any sort of connections to the higher scale teams, or there's no support for said players. So what it ends up becoming is, if you do want to eventually make your way into the LCS or, a super powered Challenger Series team, it is mostly reliant on your ability to play League of Cards. And so because of this, and because the stabs are of some teams are actually, I would say, they're overstaffed in some ways. Like they have people, you'll see them on Twitter, like so-and-so staff member for X team, so-and-so staff member for X team, and you're looking at it and you're wondering, what do you actually do and how do you get the job? And if you realize how some of them actually get the job, and when I was there as an LCS coach, for Gravity, I realized this myself. I'm like, you're getting the job because you're dating, so-and-so person, or you're getting this job because, you're doing this. You're not actually qualified to do the job, and that's why they shuffle between teams endlessly. And it's pretty problematic. So now what ends up happening is you see these teams with multi-million-dollar financial backing unable to actually field proper stabs or players and just rosters in general, because they don't actually know what the hell is going on. So it almost reminds me of a delinquent teenager who has extremely rich parents, telling the rich parents, okay, well, I just need this money to do this, I need this money to do this, I need that money to do this. And you take that parent's money and you spend it on everything, and then when the parents want to see something, or they want to see, what did you actually do with their money, you can't produce anything. So what's basically happening is whoever is in charge of hiring, the staff that, is supposed to be the foundation of said team, the person that is searching for that person clearly doesn't know what the hell is going on. And this isn't just in one team, this is across multiple teams, because again, it's who you know, not necessarily what you know. And until, teams start, realizing that you can't just throw money at things because it's not going to fix it, okay? Just ask China when they tried to steal away a ton of Koreans in Season 5. SKT didn't really care about that too much. And even though China as a whole is generally a much higher skilled region overall, not that NA and EU don't produce actual, good teams. Right now, TSM is actually looking fantastic. In EU, you have, G2 actually looking really strong right now. And this is actually building up to probably be one of the more exciting worlds relative to some of the teams that are actually coming out of NA and EU. But for a lot of other teams, you see decisions that are consistently made, and I don't want to target them, but I'm almost forced to, where, we've seen stuff like CLG have a lot of difficulty making certain decisions. In the past, in spring 2015, summer 2015, whatever, there was a lot of difficult decisions to be made. You had TSM at one point, even struggling. And TSM, by far, NA's most notoriously successful team, arguably, across the entire duration of LCS life. And TSM at one point was continuously struggling. You had Team Liquid, at one point struggling. You have all this stuff, and when a team starts doing well, it sometimes it has to be attributed to variance, because people don't realize that variance actually exists even at the professional level, mostly because of rosters and how unstable basically the scene is for the teams that are not the elite. TSM will always find a way to bounce back to the highest tiers. We'll also see teams like Cloud9, CLG, always, find ways to bounce to the highest tiers. Immortals, to my knowledge, actually has, before they decided on a team, I think that anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that they secured their staff first, and they made sure that their staff was actually qualified and well, in terms of, evaluating people, getting certain teams, managing certain stuff, and accommodating to the players and all these other needs. But when you are a rich parent and you're handing money to your kids and you're not seeing what the kids are doing with said money, you end up producing rosters like NRG or Echo Fox or all this other stuff. And it makes me feel bad for the rich parents, because it's like they either A, trust the people that they're handing the money to, and they believe that the people that they're handing their money to, they trust their lies, or B, they truly just don't know what's going on, or C, they're delusional and actually think that it's okay, but I'm almost certain that it's not going to be C. So now what ends up happening is, because LCS is limited to 10 teams and you have the relegation matches, you have these venture capitalists, which are technically, and in reality, as long as, the scene can get stable and stuff, going to be extremely healthy for the game, potentially facing relegation. And now, because we are the public looking in and we don't truly know exactly what is going on a day-to-day basis, but you don't need to really know much to see that every team that's basically up for relegation right now sucks at macro. We don't need to, be inside the house to know that certain players are performing absolutely abysmally. We don't need to be inside the house to see how the players are performing on a solo queue level, and you can say that solo queue doesn't mean a lot, but it does mean something. And while it will not make up, whether or not you are going to be an elite world-class player, it does say something. If some guy can get to 800 LP on the Korean ladder and another guy fails to ever get over 100 LP, that says that said player is at least more knowledgeable about certain concepts than the other player, and thus must also be ultimately better than the other player in some areas. Now, solo queue generally is also a measurement of mechanics to some degree. So you don't need to be in the house for that. Now, we can go into a whole other topic about, what is it going to take for NA and EU to actually maybe topple the Koreans and other stuff, and are they ever going to get close? And maybe they are actually in the next few years, because we've seen some of the most elite teams actually have proper stabs doing stuff, and there's actual direct involvement, with the players, the rosters, and the management that are in charge of, making sure that everything functions as a machine. So, with that being said, it becomes problematic because the three teams that are facing relegation potentially just get knocked out. And what ends up happening if, again, going back to the earlier 3 points, the parent was not aware of what was actually happening, they come in and they see that their team has been, knocked out of LCS. Do they just pull the cord? Do they just, completely pull out? Because if that happens, that is one of the worst things that can ever happen, especially when these venture capitalists or the extremely powerful team owners are actually still competing against their peers, except in a second bracket. And what I mean by that is obviously Cloud9 Challenger is attached directly to Cloud9. So it's sort of like, Cloud9 is creating a second super roster to knock out one team from LCS, and then obviously someone can purchase the LCS slot. But that's a little bit problematic. Because if the venture capitalist or another venture capitalist, sees what's going on, you could have another billionaire look at League of Legends and then see that Rick Fox's or Shaquille O'Neal's team got relegated. What's to, potentially not make that person who isn't aware of League of Legends as a whole and has no real understanding about how the League of Cards operates in said regions, from going, hey, well, if, Rick Fox's team and Shaquille O'Neal's team, got relegated after one split, why am I going to potentially risk $1 million to $2 million on a team where I don't know anything about it and I don't know how to actually get people that are qualified to tell me what I need to know about it so that I'm making a positive investment? When that starts becoming a real thought for other venture capitalists or other major sponsors that might be willing to get into League of Legends, you start becoming a lot more problematic of a scene in order to remain stable and remain constant. One of the things I'm going back to is if you look at LCK right now, and you even look at the Challenger series, and not just Korea as well, but you can look at China, you'll notice that there are not a lot of old pros actually remaining still in LCK. Now, if you look at NA and EU, you see pros who are and have still been playing since Season 2, Season 3, Season 1 even in some cases. Why is that? And, I'll give you a hint. It's not actually because they've withstood the test of time completely, because, it's more so, again, related to the League of Cards. Now, there are pros that are still absolutely fantastic at their role, barring that they don't tilt, Soaz being one of them. You have other players like Bjergsen, who's been playing for a very, very, very long time. He's one of the best mid laners in the world. But when you start recycling some professional players who at one point might have been okay, but now they just aren't, and I'm sorry to say that, and I don't mean to hurt your feelings, it doesn't make any sense. And if you have someone that is in charge of making these decisions saying that it makes sense, well then I think that that's really the root of your problem, not necessarily the player getting the slot in the first place. So until, the League of Cards stuff maybe stops and until teams start actually figuring out what is going to be essential, what's going to end up happening is NA and EU are going to consistently be extremely top-heavy. And what I mean by top-heavy is I mean that you're always going to have consistently 1, 2, or 3 teams that are always at the very top, and then every other team is going to be an absolute disaster because, again, it's who you know and not what you know.